Hey everybody, my name is Danny Dumas, and this is the Earn Your Title podcast. Welcome back. Today I have Andres Ayesta. We're going to talk about your health. We're going to talk about eating, food, diet, nutrition. But before we do all that, and before I have Andres introduce himself, I have a question. When I go to the doctor and my blood work is off, high cholesterol, maybe my sugar's off, and my doctor's going to give me some medical advice, what advice does it give me that's currently wrong?
Well, first, thank you, Danny, for having me. The advice that he's giving is no advice at all a lot of times. And that's the biggest
fair.
problem that I'm seeing with doctors, which is blanket generic advice. Either take a pill or fix your diet. That's it. That's what I typically tend to hear often.
Just the general, just fix your diet, just do better.
Work on your diet.
Right?
Work on your diet. Like, that's all they say. And no direction. So if you're asking me what's missing, it's just direction. What to do according to me and my life and who I am. And that's where I think there's a big gap in healthcare in America, and where people like me, coaches, come in to try to fill it.
Gotcha. So Andres, what is your coaching? What are you, like, where are you coming from it? What's your history? How, why should I listen to what you're telling me?
Yeah. First off, I always tell people, like, always listen to it with a grain of salt, even to people like me, because there's just a lot of people full of it out in this industry. But just for people listening know who I am. I'm a registered dietitian. I've been doing this for 12 years. My story started back when I wanted to be a doctor. Originally, where I'm from is Venezuela, South America. I grew up there, but up until I was 21. Grew up wearing stethoscopes and things, hoping that I would become a doctor, and then I didn't get into med school. That was definitely dreams came crashing down on me, and nutrition was a school that seemed an option to be able to transfer over to medical school. And at the time when I was 18, I thought that was the plan, and I realized that my role as a dietitian was going to be more impactful because I could help people prevent disease. You were talking earlier before we recorded that, doctors help people get to zero, but a lot of times, like, how do we even get to a place where we're not even getting to need a doctor? And that's what, for me, preventive health is. And my coaching has evolved around that. I was an athlete growing up my whole life, so I naturally had a tendency to want to be involved in sports. So I wanted to be a sports medicine doctor when I wanted to be a doctor. And I realized that dietitians also have this field called sports nutrition. So I moved to the United States on scholarships. That was my dream. I was like, if I'm going to work with athletes, I need to go to the country that had the best athletes in the world, in my opinion. And I decided to come here. So I finished my schooling here, and I became a sports dietitian, and I filled my dream to work with pro athletes. So when my career started earlier, I worked with pro athletes in most leagues: NFL, Major League Baseball, NHL, even Olympic athletes. And that taught me a lot about coaching not just athletes, but just people in general. So my coaching has evolved from working with pro athletes to my, then obviously adding on my own struggles as a man, evolving as a father. Now I'm 36. I have a 2-year-old, and dealing with my own traumas and my own difficulties. So what I do, I coach men and women, but I really love to work with men a lot, is to help them become a better version of themselves, for as cheesy as that may sound, in 4 key areas: their mindset, their lifestyle, their nutrition, and the way that they move. And I believe that if I'm able to help them do that, then they're going to really show up better as men, as fathers and husbands, and just sons and brothers in general. So that's what we do inside of Planus Nutrition, which is the company that I founded closer to almost 10 years ago, actually, this year.
Awesome. And is your coaching mostly online, in person?
Yeah.
Are you,
well, we do a little bit of both.
What is coaching? Is it right? Go ahead.
Can you repeat that? I didn't hear that.
I said, is it, it's online and in person?
Yes.
And what is coaching actually? Is it, is it like writing meal plans, like saying you should eat this, or is
Yeah.
it more the like on the mindset side with some tools built in?
So to answer the first question, I do mostly online, but I live in Tampa, Florida, and I do occasionally get people reaching out for help in person. So sometimes I provide that. But for the most part, most of our clients, we've served well over 400 to 500 people ever since we started. And I would say probably over 60-70% of them are all around the world. My coaching is it's kind of like teaching or giving people what they want, but really, or telling them what they want, but then also give them what they need. Most people, when they come to me
Nice.
as a dietitian, they expect what you just mentioned, a meal plan or a diet plan, like tell me what to eat. And the reality and what I explain is people's nutritional struggles are usually a symptom of a deeper problem. So I try to coach them in those four key areas that we talked about. I always tell people when it comes down to nutrition, in order for you to fix what you're eating, you got to fix your habits. So we work on our lifestyle around that. In order for you to be able to fix your habits, you got to fix your, like, what's happening here, right? So what happens in between ear and ear, which is your mindset, right? What is driving you to make those decisions to be able to eat better? So when you change the way you think, you change the way you live. And when you change the way you live, you change the way you eat as well.
Is that part of your blueprint method in the like the core
Yeah.
philosophies?
Yeah. So Planos Nutrition is a Spanish word. Planos stands for blueprint. And to me, micro philosophies to help people build their own. The thing with nutrition is that, and what really bothers me a lot of times in this field, which has exploded a lot ever since COVID, is the fact that is very generic, right? And there's people that just insert blank diet name into people's lives,
Right.
and then they expect to follow them, like kind of like a direction booklet. And to me, everybody's different. Everybody comes from different backgrounds, different, places, and have different needs. So I help them build a blueprint and for their own health, their own wellness, their own nutrition and fitness. So that's what it stands for.
Would you say that it's fair you that you could get healthy, eating mostly vegetables, but you could also get health eating mostly meat? Like, would you say like the world gets real segmented into these like boxes, but in reality, you have to do you. Like me and you might be able to eat the same meal at the same time and do the same workout with different results. Is that fair?
Yes. The best diet that works for people is the one that you can, one, sustain, and not only that, but it can also work well for your health and your goals. And point in case, not only do I coach people how to do nutrition the right way, but I also try to put myself through certain situations or different, we call it experiments, to help them do that. And you mentioned the word vegetables and meat, and there's a huge thing around carnivore diets and also like
Right.
people on the vegan diets and stuff like that. So I recently, not to get into the weeds of it, but I did an entire full 60-day experiment where I did exactly that. I went on mostly vegetables and whole foods for 30 days, and then I ate like only meat for 30 days, and then like the results would shock you in terms of really what happened. But I guess for people listening in, what the main outcome or the main conclusion from this kind of self-study that I did, from the perspective of body composition, which is losing fat or losing weight, both diets, because they both had the same amount of calories, had no difference. So when a lot of the men are listening to this and they're like, I want to get the six pack, I want to get leaner and all the different things, which at the surface level is what most of us want, both diets yield exactly the same results. So that proved the point that I had, that at the end of the day, calorically, as long as both diets are equal, then it doesn't matter which one you follow. Now, from the whole perspective of health, then my labs, you look at the stuff when I did this carnivore part of it, my doctor called me. He was concerned, right? So, from the health perspective, for me, it was not great eating meat, for example, only. So this is why ultimately it's a very personal thing for everyone. I felt great on it, but then there was obviously some more things to it. So to answer, I guess the main takeaway from this part of it is the best diet. It's honestly the one that not only you can sustain, but it's going to be the most healthy for you as well.
When it comes to like figuring out your health, are you a fan of the more advanced like blood panels and like, I get advertised to on Instagram daily on Hone Health and all these like, hey, get your blood taken because there's more that your doctors. What's your take on like advanced blood work to figure out exactly where you're at?
I love that personally. And then let me tell you why. We're going to circle back to the first question you asked me today, which was about doctors and what they're telling you or not telling you. The issue that we have in the United States and the healthcare system here is that, well, it's expensive, number one, not only for insurance companies, but also for us. So when you go to a doctor and you tell them, hey, I want to get a checkup, I want to get some labs done, unless you have diagnoses that call for specific labs to do, then they won't send it. So whenever you go to a doctor, they give you a very basic panel, a very, very basic that does not look in depth of all the things that me, as a practitioner, dietitian, I would like to see. So and this is what we do inside of our program, I do the panels myself and I pay for them myself and build it into our programs. Why? Because I don't want I don't want my guys to be able to have to deal with that. And we do an advanced testing panel. I don't want to just look at your hormones, like for example, testosterone. I want to understand exactly what your free testosterone levels are and also your sex hormone binding globulin. And for people listening, those are indicators of understanding not just how much testosterone you have, but then also how your body's using it very effectively. So yes, I absolutely love and recommend advanced testing, but at the same time, to working with somebody that can interpret it adequately and be able to give you direction on what to do with that information adequately as well.
When it comes to health, do you think we're doing ourselves a disservice when we say like I want to lose weight as opposed to I want to be healthy? Do you think there's an importance in having that change in mindset of health? Because probably 10 years ago, I did some personal training, like group fitness, and I had people, and we would do, they hadn't lost weight in like 3 weeks. And I would say, listen, if I could add 100 pounds to the scale, but you looked good and felt good, would you care what the scale said as if you look good and felt good? And they're like, well, no, I wouldn't want to weigh 100 pounds. I'm like, no, you can't see it. You can't see it at all. But when you step on the scale, the number goes up 100 more pounds. Would you care? Like, where's your take on health versus just the obsession with losing weight?
I always explain to anyone, my audience or clients that we work with, that I'm not a weight-driven coaching program. Even though we look at that, I always make it a side effect of the changes that they're making. So no, I don't love when people make weight loss the main top priority or like the main outcome. In fact, when somebody tells me I want to lose 20 pounds, the question that I ask them afterwards is why? And usually the why or the answer to that question, when we kind of go a little bit deeper, I call it like peeling the layers of an onion, we get to the real reason why people want to lose weight. And it comes down to, particularly when I've coached hundreds of men, and it comes down to a few different things. One, they want to feel like confident again, right? Like us as men, we want to be able to, whether it's we want to be providers or we want to just show up as the best version we can be of ourselves, or we just want to have just more confidence. Like ultimately, that's kind of the things that drive us, right? That makes us to show up better for work and for our kids and different things like that. So it's not just the 20 pounds you want to lose. It's kind of your identity, is the type of person you're trying to become. So what I try to coach people on the mindset aspect of things is not to be so fixated. And I love what you just mentioned about, if I added extra pounds on the scale, you never saw it, because I asked a very similar question. It's like, if you looked incredible, you look in your mirror and people will tell you like, man, you look amazing. Like, would it matter if you lost or not the 20 pounds? And everybody's like, no, it wouldn't. Exactly. So we don't get fixated on that. The problem is we live in a like weight loss culture or like diet culture that the main word weight loss, right? It's like if loss is not occurring in my weight, then technically it's not a success, right? So that's why a lot of times, and I've even shared stories of clients who've lost zero weight, but yet you look at their pictures and their transformations and they're like day and night. So that's why I feel pursuing health as a means to also, or maybe in the way of that process, you're going to lose some weight is a better approach, because it's not as filled with anxiety whenever you step on the scale and you see a number that doesn't really or that you feel like it's not favorable to you, and at the same time you get excited when then you're 2 pounds down, when in reality too that
Right.
maybe doesn't necessarily mean anything either, you know.
Right. You just peed a lot today.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. So, in order to get maybe like a concrete example of what we could do, I'm gonna give you my problem, and maybe you can give me something I can do today or tomorrow that would kind of like lead me towards a healthier life. We won't even necessarily call it weight loss, but I know I feel like I would like to lose 10 pounds.
Hmm.
I'm at 210. I'd like to be under 200 pounds. I eat good. I would say I eat fairly decent food most of the time. Like today, we're gonna have chili with half ground beef and half venison or elk venison. Like I try to make an effort, but I've gone. I was heavier and I'm now lighter, and I'm just having a hard time getting to that next 10 pounds. And I realized as a 45-year-old, I used to outwork my diet. I would just go work harder in the gym. Now that doesn't happen. Give me something that I could do today or tomorrow this week just to make myself a healthier person.
Well, first, dude, you look 30 to me. When you just said 45, I'm like,
Oh,
what in the world? So you got that going for you. The first question I ask you is like, well, why 200? Like, why would that, like, what would this like 10 extra pounds that you're carrying on you allow you to do differently that you can now?
so I've noticed that like there's some things physically. I'm a fireman. That's my full time job. That is harder as I'm heavier.
Okay.
You know, like in the gym, I could do more pull ups when I was
Yep.
lighter. Like putting on my gear, going up and down the stairs feels harder, and it seemed easier at
Yep.
200 pounds. And maybe I was just in better health. So there are some physical things that I've noticed that as I've gotten bigger, it's not as I'm not as effective in my job. In addition to that, my clothes, I haven't bought any new clothes. So my clothes don't fit as good at 200 pounds or at 210 as they did at
Yeah.
200. So those are probably why I picked that number. Cause if I rewind my life and I get back to that 199, I felt a little bit better. I was more effective and probably my clothes, they fit better.
Okay,
Those are the
I
three
love that.
things.
So now that we know the drivers for it, then we try to focus on what's kind of kept you there, because one of the toughest place to be is those who you already are doing most of the things, right? You work out, you stay active, you eat well for the most part, right? So you're checking technically all the boxes. So then we start to really try to like figure out, okay, what's not really working. What I have noticed, and in your case, I think this is also what happens, is like we get into this place where our habits typically keep us in the same like buffer weight very, very normally. And it's really difficult to get out of it because of the fact that we had to kind of push ourselves outside, a little bit outside of our comfort zone, whether it's through more development of awareness, which I'm going to explain what that is in a second, or just more effort on your end. So let's break it down in terms of what I think you should do initially. The first thing I always tell people is I have them do what we call a life audit, right? You cannot change something you can't see. And sometimes you have to go into the deep weeds of understanding what is it that you're not doing or that you're doing maybe wrong. So step one, number one, that I would actually ask you to do, I just asked to do this to a guy last week, is I will start tracking your nutrition. Especially for somebody who just, you don't only need to lose 10 pounds. The reality is most likely you haven't lost it because, well, you're not creating the right conditions for this. So how do we do that? Well, first, we need to figure out exactly what are the current conditions. So I would ask you, well, track your food for 3 to 7 days, but be like crazy detailed. Whether you want to put it on paper or using an app, I personally recommend an app called Chronometer. I like it much better. If you are familiar with tracking apps, I like it much better than MyFitnessPal, mostly because their database is a lot more realistic for most people. So then I would ask you, okay, track your food for 7 days. See what you find. Like, what are the inconsistencies and consistencies? What I would notice for you or for a lot of guys that I work with is that their weekends look a little bit different than the weekdays. And ultimately what it comes down to is they're not creating the right calorie balance for maybe just something you have talked about in previous podcast episodes, which is a calorie deficit. You need to make sure that the amount of calories you consume on a daily basis is less than total amount of calories you need to burn that are burning every day. But here's the caveat around that. It's not something that you need to be paying attention to just daily, but just in general as a week. And that's a part of where a lot of guys would make mistakes. So I would guarantee for you, Danny, that if I were looking at that 7-day like average log, if you were super detailed, we would find the reasons why you're not able to lose 10 extra pounds. So that's number one. Once we determine that, well, maybe it's the fact that you're not creating the right conditions, then we set, or at least I try to like focus on setting what we like to call the core 5. These are 5 things that I would want all of my guys to always focus on as the foundation of health. And I would want to make sure that I audit those 5 things and see if this is actually something that you're actually doing. But before we continue on that, did that make sense what I mentioned about tracking your food, and what questions may have come up as we talked about that?
Yeah, no, it definitely does. I mean, because as much as we don't want it to be a math problem, it is a math problem. Where do you, as far as when I tell you, okay, I'm consuming 2,300 calories based on the tracker, where do you get my baseline to say that that is too much or not enough? Or do you just lower it till I'm losing weight and go there, that's where you were at, now you're below it?
Yeah.
How do you figure that part out?
So I do 2 things. I first look at the numbers based on what a calculator will give me. So we use specific equations specifically for men, and we'll determine that number. And we'll say, okay, like, Danny's supposed to be consuming for maintenance 2,500 calories. And then like you are telling me based on your log that you're consistently consuming 2,300 calories a day, but you're not losing any weight. Technically, you're eating less. So then I go based on what you're currently doing, and I start there. And we say, okay, Danny, for the next 7 days, we are going to lower that average that you're consuming, because here's what a lot of people typically will make the mistake with is like, well, I'm consuming 2,300 calories. Well, that doesn't mean that that's what you're doing every day exactly. You could be consuming 4,000 calories on Saturday, but then 1,800 calories on a Monday. So that's why I try to normalize it. So the first thing I do is I try to build consistency on your days, weekdays and weekends. So then I'll say, okay, let's try to go for like a 1,900 calorie day. Like if we want to be aggressive, right? Because ultimately too, the more muscle you have and like the more weight you have to lose, it depends on like how aggressive you want to be when it comes down to that. So then I'll ask you, do you want to go, and I'll ask you now, do you want to go slow and steady, right? Like, and it doesn't have to be like a pound a week or whatever, just like slow and steady, realistic, or you want to just, honestly, you're on a timeline and you want to be more aggressive. That would be the first question I ask you, because there's going to be 2 different ways to manage this accordingly.
Yeah. Like I would say right now it would be slow and steady. I teach, in addition to being a fireman, I teach at the fire academy. So both of those things are going on at the same time. And my ability to focus heavily on something is probably going to be limited. So just, nice and steady would be helpful right now.
Okay. With that in mind, then I would establish a timeline, and I would say, okay, 16 weeks, which is 4 months. That's enough time where you can create a plan for you that is realistic and sustainable. But then I always I tell my clients to really create a timeline. Why is that a timeline important? Because you want to make sure that you have mentally a place where you're beginning and ending in terms of the effort that you're going to be putting towards something. Because if you say, okay, this is week 1, and we a lot of times like to think on like beginning and ends, even though you're building a lifestyle that is long term. It's like, okay, like over the next 16 weeks, this is the season. So the reason I say this is because, and why I like to use timelines is, I used to work with a lot of athletes. So when you think about like pro athletes, they have different seasonalities in their sport. Right now it's football season, right? So these guys are going through a preseason moment, and they're going through the season, and they're off season and stuff like that. So they have different focus areas. I do believe that for most men, regardless whether you need to lose 100 pounds or 10 pounds, you always need to look at your year in different seasons. Maybe there's an improvement season. Let's call it the one that you have right now, that you want to lose like 10 pounds. Well, okay, like establish what that time frame is going to look like. 16 weeks. I'm starting today, and then it's going to go until the end of the year. Great. So then we establish the things that you need to start to adjust. In this case, we're going to lower your calories. We're going to focus on making sure you're getting enough protein, right? We want to ensure that the training is also adequate towards this. And there's certain things you're going to have to do above what we call your baseline. Because here's the reality, Danny. Right now, the things you're currently doing day in, day out, They're just, I call them your baseline. It's the things that keep you where you're at. You're not gaining weight, but you're also not losing it, right? So you had to operate above that baseline in order for you to be able to accomplish something. And that applies to both like your nutrition, your movement, lifestyle, right? You have to kind of do certain things differently. And that's where like I think you'll start to find that, okay, like things start to move, and then you're consistently seeing some changes, but that they're slower. Make sense?
Oh yeah, for sure. One thing that made a lot of sense, I really hadn't thought about it, is you need to be averaging under your calories, as opposed, because I think day to day is easy to think about. Yeah, if you had a 4,000 calorie Saturday, that your 200 negative on Tuesdays is not really helping, right? You had so much more. So to think of it as like over a week, like that does make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, and it's where a lot of times like some of these like a lot of people make a lot of mistakes, and this is the thing, like your body is so dynamic. Like the thing with calories is like these are not numbers that are set in stone. Why? Well, because one day you could be walking a little bit more, so you're burning a little bit more calories. So another day you could be walking less. So there's so many different ups and downs that the human body does that we can never determine that. So for me, I try to control as many variables as possible, and we try to change one at a time. So let's say I'm coaching you, right? And you're like, okay, week one, Danny, let's go with like this much. And let's just also consider the fact that you're a person that is advanced, because maybe some of your listeners, they don't even know what a macro is. Let's just, for the sake of this conversation, saying, okay, like, the basics of it. You maybe track your calories before. So like, we just need to kind of work a little bit on like helping you plan better. Great. So let's say you're starting. We're only adjusting. I'm going to tell you, don't change your training this week. I just want you to only focus on your nutrition. Okay, Andres, like you come back and you check in with me. Like I was really good and I consumed 1900 calories. And we see that there's a fluctuation down in weight, half a pound or a pound. It's like, okay, well, this is actually working. And let's say you worked out exactly the same. So then we continue to do that for another week. Let's say we kind of plateaued. Okay, let's give it another week and see what happens. So this is slow and steady, right? Okay, like still plateauing. Okay, you know what we're gonna do, Danny? Let's look at your training. Let's look at what you're doing. Maybe we can start to add a little bit more movement in. So that's the second piece that we start to focus on. We need to maybe add a little bit of cardio, or maybe you just need to go on a walk with your family, like maybe for 20 minutes that you're not currently doing right now, on top of your activity as a fireman, and all those different things like that. So we start to change. The problem that a lot of times many coaches or people make is like they throw everything at you at once. Which if you would have told me I'm on a timeline and I want to be fast and effective, this conversation would have been different. Because from my perspective, I want to make sure this is something that aligns with who you are as you said you're a dad, right? You have kids? Yeah. So
Yeah, 3 kids.
So as a dad of 3 kids, as a husband, as a fireman, like all these different things, you got already a full plate. So adding a lot of stuff to do. Yeah. And I think this is where a lot of guys really run into issues, that they're expecting to do what they were doing in their 20s to accomplish their 20-pound weight loss. And they're expecting to do the same thing when they're 45, and they have 20 different responsibilities that they didn't have back then. And then they're wondering, well, this just doesn't seem to work. My metabolism is broken, and all these different things as they start to think about. No, man. The problem is like have a bunch of other things that you now need to take care of as an adult that you didn't have to back then. And that's where a lot of times people will find some issues with that. And it's just a lot of times very difficult to see.
I think that's some good coaching, Andres. It seems like you've done this before.
About a couple years of worth doing it.
couple times. That's awesome. I think those are very actionable steps. So we've got a little bit of time left. So I'm going to ask you some random questions. I know you did an experiment with creatine. And what was your take on like 4-timesing creatine?
Yeah. I started doing that not too long ago. I'm an evidence-based dietitian, so I like to look at the science and really dive into the science before I make any recommendations. But sometimes I like to just test out stuff on my own. So first off, creatine has been around forever. It's one of the most research supplements out there. But most guys probably listening, if you've heard of creatine, it's been more touted towards performance, or specifically strength and power, specific type of sports or disciplines. And that's what it's been researched for the most. And in fact, when you talk about creatine, you only attribute it to guys in the gym, right? Like the bodybuilders or just people like that, or athletes. Now, there's been more research on creatine on its benefits at the cognitive level, which in other words means at the mind level or at the brain level. And it makes sense. Creatine, essentially what it's doing, it's fueling a specific energy storage so you can have like better usage of that energy. And well, the brain uses 20% of the energy that your body requires is used by the brain. So it would make sense. Well, like if we improve energy systems in the brain, wouldn't it make sense that this is going to benefit? So they put that to the test and they studied it. So they look at what happens when we start to supplement more of creatine in terms of brain benefits. And I started doing exactly what those protocols call for. They said that anywhere between 10 to 20 grams of creatine on a daily basis is most effective for things like memory improvement, reduction of depression symptoms. Um, I'm going to get very vulnerable in here to, I think that's something that a lot of times the listeners appreciate. I was diagnosed with depression a year and a half ago, going through a lot of difficulties. So for me, I went on a quest to try to figure out, okay, what are ways that I can manage this? Because for people that don't know, depression is essentially, yeah, it is a condition, but it's a condition of the brain. There's chemical imbalances and certain things that are happening in there. So my mind went on to like, okay, how can I improve that chemical imbalance, whether it was through medication or supplementation? So I figure, okay, well, like there's interesting research in creatine. Why not go that route? So I started taking about 20 grams of creatine every single day. And I'm not going to say it's the only thing that's helped, but I personally think it's supported me in many different things, like working memory, to also just improving the way that I do feel. I always tell people that supplements, for the most part, it's not something you always feel per se, but I do see the benefits that are objectively measured in a lot of these studies. So I'm going to believe and go based on that. And this is why I've started taking, again, 15 to 20 grams of creatine monohydrate. That's still the best one to take every single day.
Yep. Yeah, I actually watched your part of your YouTube video where you talked about it, and I was taking 5 milligrams. I'm like, I'm gonna start taking 10 and see how I feel. It's only been maybe 4 or 5 days, so I think the still out whether I feel a difference, but it makes a lot of sense to me. In addition to creatine, any other supplements you would recommend a guy take?
Yeah, omega-3s, mostly because we don't get enough. We get it from mostly sources like fish, and other sources that are plant-based, but we don't get enough. So I think anybody could benefit from a high dose omega-3 fatty acids. I specifically recommend the ones that are triglyceride-based. And there's specific brands like Nordic Naturals, and there's a couple others that offer them. But I do recommend people to take more than, this is so important, so make sure you take note of this. The combination in omega-3s of EPA and DHA, which is the basic main active components of omega-3s, should be more than 1,000 milligrams. This is something where a lot of times people go and buy whatever fish oil they'll find at Costco. They're not looking at the label to really understand the quality of it. So we recommend, or I personally take more than, I think closer, for me, it's about 2,000 milligrams of those two things combined. So a high potency omega-3 is important. The second supplement I recommend, now this is granted you did some blood tests to understand this, it's vitamin D. Vitamin D3 specifically combined with K2. The reason why I recommend it is because there's a very high incidence of deficiencies in the world around vitamin D. In fact, I live in Florida, and for people that don't know, you get vitamin D from exposure to the sun. You don't get it much from your diet. And you would think a person who lives in Florida who gets plenty of sun exposure and there's no actual winter time in here per se, you would not be vitamin D deficient. I was, and I was very surprised. Because it turns out the people that are like specific descent, like Hispanics, African Americans, they tend to not produce as much vitamin D. So then I recommend supplementation. So I take 5,000 IUs of vitamin D every single day, and I recommend it with K2 for improved absorption. And that's the second one that I feel like everybody could benefit from. And that's honestly the most. A multivitamin sometimes, if you're in a calorie deficit, or you're dieting, mostly because you can help you fill important gaps. But that's pretty much it. Anything above that, it's going to be just for a specific benefit or something, more in detail that you're really trying to accomplish.
That's good advice. I like it. Yeah, like we live in Michigan and we don't get all the vitamin. Like we're entering the season where nobody gets vitamin D. And my wife, she being darker skinned as well, she had that deficit, so that's something she is supplementing, and I probably should as well. Is there a question I haven't asked you that I should have?
Well, it's a good question to ask. I think plenty, but if there's anything that I feel like a lot of times I like to talk on podcasts about is just um, mostly what are like where should people start if this is like they're new to their journey. Because I feel like this is what's going to help them at least kind of get something valuable for them to just take from this conversation today. I'm very into applying knowledge, not just learning stuff. I mean, there's a lot of things that you learn, and there's not a lack of information in this world right now. It's just more specifics on how to implement that said information. So if I was to say a question and say like, where should I start?
Gotcha. Cool. Where can they start with you? Where
Okay.
can guys find you?
Yeah. Well, first I'll answer the question, where should people start? Because I'm going to share my core 5, which I think it's helpful for people to really say, okay, like if I really wanted to improve my nutrition, what should I do? Without,
Okay.
let's say, not counting calories and all those different things like that. So over the years, I've developed this thing called the core 5, which are 5, I always call them stupid things because most likely you know what they are, but I like to kind of give it a name so that you have some form of framework to really focus on as your main base things every single day. So, and I'll list them out real quick so know what they are. Number 1, it's prioritizing protein. If there's any type of macronutrient that has more importance than others, I would say protein would be it. And what I mean by that is not specifically going for a number, just making sure that every single meal you consume, you ask yourself, am I getting a source of protein here? That's number 1. The second is drink enough water. Like it's one of those things that is just so under like, it's not many people are taking care of this as they should, and they're getting too focused on like stuff that don't matter, like alkaline water and stuff. Just drink enough water.
All right.
Hydrating adequately is important. The third thing that I would focus on is not skip meals. Even in the midst of people saying intermittent fasting and all that stuff, the reason why I say don't skip meals is because when you skip a meal, particularly when it's not on purpose, you're going to end up overeating later. And that really creates the problem that you just mentioned. Sometimes you just feel stuck and nothing is moving. Number 3, it's moving your body. It doesn't matter whether it's like this crazy training program. We are very sedentary, particularly like as we work in like online and stuff like that. Not you in your case, but for most people, that's the case. So move your body. Just be prioritizing movement every single day. And number 5 is making sure you're getting some color in your diet. This means fruits and vegetables and fiber consumption. It's going to help you control the overall intake of food you consume, and it's all going to make you feel much better overall and improve quality of what you're consuming or what you're eating as well. In my 12 years as a dietitian, when I look at the success of my clients who've not only either lost weight or achieved an improvement in their health, when I look at what they have in common, those that have maintained their goals and those that haven't, I always refer back to these 5 things when I have asked them, and this is how I came up with that. So people listening in, ask yourself if you're checking these 5 boxes every single day. In fact, do yourself a challenge for 30 days. Can I check these 5 boxes every single day? And you're going to see your life transform.
That's amazing. So I have 2 more questions and then we'll wrap it up. One is if they need help. This is good information, and some people can take that and run with it, but if they need help, how can they get involved with Planos, and how can they get involved with you? How does
Yeah.
that work?
So I coach clients one-on-one, and I still do all the coaching myself. I always emphasize the importance of mentorship. And I think I'm sure you have talked about this in the past. In fact, I hire coaches for me because I need that accountability and that guidance. So you can reach out to me either at planusnutrition.com is where we have all of our details in terms of our program. We have a fantastic 4-month program that is foundational, that really covers all these things, labs and all the different things like that you're wondering. So the best place to go is just apply for it. I am very particular about who we take in because we want to make sure you are in the right mindset to ensure that you do this adequately. Like you said, I don't want people that just want to come in here to lose 20 pounds and get me the 20 pounds off. I want to understand exactly what it is. And if you're driven to the why behind it. So that's the best place. But also you can check out a lot of our free resources that I have. You saw my YouTube channel and you saw my YouTube video around creatine. So I try to come up with a new different video every single day or every single week. And we're all very active on our Instagram account at Andres Ayesta, my first and last name, where you can check out some of the other stuff that I also share on there. But that would be the best place to start. That you can connect with me, and I'm sure you add this in the show notes and all that stuff so that people can just find out more about me.
Awesome. And last question, what does it mean to have radical responsibility when it comes to your health?
Oh man, I love that because I talk about radical responsibility all the time. That means to own up to your success and to own up to what happens to you. It's your responsibility, it's nobody else's. So stop pointing fingers at external circumstances, but control what you can within you, and your thoughts have power. So really reevaluate the way you're thinking, and again, your life can start to transform and change.
Awesome. Well, you guys, I think you've gotten a lot out of this. I know I have. Andres, I really appreciate it. So, man, if you're listening, go find Andres online. I will link everything in the show notes. As always, my name is Danny Dumas, and this is the Earn Your Title podcast, and I'll talk to you there.